Ladies and gentlemen, it is safe to assume that the battle for the Strait of Hormuz has now started. Let me give you the background. Yesterday night, circa 9 p.m. Nigerian time, the President of the United States of America did a long, in the person of President Trump, did a long Truth Social post. In that post, he essentially stated that for purported humanitarian reasons, the Navy of the United States of America, as requested by unnamed countries who have neutral and unaffiliated, uninvolved ships in the Persian Gulf, that those countries have requested that the United States of America, out of its kindness and and its generosity, should please escort the over 2,000 ships that are trapped within the Strait of Hormuz, blockaded by Iran, out of the Strait of Hormuz into safety and onto their business. So as as innocent as that post sounds, you know quite well that essentially it is effectively the end of the ceasefire and the start of a new battle. One of the several battles of this Iran versus America war. And that will be the battle for the Strait of Hormuz. Let me take you back into history. Let me give you again some background so that you will fully understand what exactly is at play here. You see, stated or unstated, admitted or unadmitted, the United States of America has some important goals with respect to this war that it wants to achieve. It has made a play, it has taken shots at some of those goals via some battles. All of them so far have been unsuccessful. Its first goal was regime change. Swipe off, unalive all of the current leaders of Iran and replace them with fearful, pliant, submissive, and surrendered leaders, exactly like the Venezuelan scenario. That particular battle of the larger war started on February 28 with the unaliving of the supreme leader of Iran and several other military, civilian, and scientific leaders of Iran thereafter. After 38 days to 40 days of battle, that war goal failed. Regime change did not happen in Iran. In fact, if regime change happened, then it means that a more radical leadership replaced the Iranian leaders that were unalived. That was the first battle, the first war goal of the US of A and Israel failed. The second goal was capturing Iran's enriched uranium, all 440 kilograms of them believed to be buried under the deep rocks and mountains of Isfahan in Iraq. They made a play for that particular enriched uranium, which was the second major battle within the war. Back then, during the hot phase of the war, you remember the F-15 pilot saga, when suddenly they created the so-called temporary landing strip inside Iran, and everybody thought they were going for the Hormuzgan province, while they were actually going for the Isfahan environment to go and try to capture the enriched uranium. Unfortunately, it failed, and the Iranians ended up trapping and killing a massive volume of American aerial assets in the process of the battle. That was the second war goal, capturing Iran's enriched uranium. It failed, and it failed spectacularly in that second battle. The third major battle is what was launched by President Trump yesterday night, capturing and seizing control of the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, and other critical Iranian islands in that environment. That battle started yesterday night by President Trump's announcement. By the announcement, he said by this morning, May 4, that particular military exploit will start. Some American media try to waver, and try to say that no, they will not be escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That they will just be encouraging, those civilian ships on the Persian Gulf to actually break the Iranian, blockade and try to zoom past the Iranians out of the Strait of Hormuz. I wonder how that will happen. The Iranians responded immediately. Both the conventional Iranian army called their tesh, The IRGC, led by the Khatam al-Anbiya military headquarters, and even the head of the Iranian Parliamentary Security Commission, stated clearly that if the US of A makes a play for the Strait of Hormuz and its adjoining islands and breaches essentially the perimeter of the Strait of Hormuz, that it's going to be fire for fire. That was the status quo until this morning, about 1 hour ago, when it was reported by Iranian media, including Iranian state media, that the Americans actually tried to spirit a destroyer, a single, American military warship, destroyer class, through the Strait of Hormuz, close to an Iranian island, close to the coast of Iran, through the Strait of Hormuz, and then they fired 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles at that destroyer. Apparently, the destroyer got scared. It may have sustained or not some damage, but it's clearly turned around and ran back out of the environment of the Strait of Hormuz towards the Sea of Oman and towards the Arabian Sea, well away from the Strait of Hormuz. That happened. Immediately, the Americans mobilized their air assets, the MQ-4 Tritons, their drones right there, in the aerial area, and then they also mobilized some Poseidon spy aircraft, to support the other American destroyers and warships and the aircraft carriers that were on, back into the Sea of Oman and into the Arabian Sea, essentially to posture for war. And what did the Iranians do immediately? Just before I came into the studio this morning, they fired a massive volume of anti-ship ballistic missiles into the waters of the perimeters of the Strait of Hormuz, essentially creating, like I said in one of my old videos, the area denial anti-access circumstance, such that any American warship that actually tries to make a play yet again for the Strait of Hormuz will essentially enter into a volley, into a barrage of anti-ship ballistic missile fire. That is by that. Now, let us talk about the prospects of this war. Basically, it's not looking very good for the Americans, while it is looking particularly good for the Iranians. I will explain to you. First and foremost, the Americans are coming to this war underarmed and undershipped. Don't forget that close to 50% of the critical weaponry, talking of tomahawks, talking of ballistic missiles, talking of anti-aircraft systems, talking of radars, talking of domes, talking of even fighting planes, have actually been massively depleted by the Iranians. Even their naval assets are massively depleted. That is why their blockade has been leaky. They simply don't have enough ships to do even the blockade, not to talk of now gunning for the soul of the Strait of Hormuz. In total, they have 12 ships in that environment. Unfortunately, the 3rd aircraft carrier that was part of what they brought to the Middle East to do the fighting, which was the biggest and the best and most expensive, the Gerald Ford, $13 billion of it, has been forced to turn back home, and it is now on its way back to America to essentially taking repairs because it has been battered massively because of the hefty activities it has involved himself in military on the waters of Venezuela and in and around the Middle East. That leaves the US of A even more, so to say, depleted in terms of what they need to fight this war. Another major challenge the Americans are going to face is the peculiar geography of the Strait of Hormuz. It is very thin along that curve. You should see it on your screen as we speak. Very thin along that curve. It is just 24 kilometers or miles. I'm not sure of the dimension. Unfortunately, the actual passable region, for ships, right within that curve is just 3 kilometers to and 3 kilometers through. That makes it perfectly easy for the Iranians to actually take out whatever ship they want to, military or civilian, including aircraft carriers. That was why what the Americans always do is that they probe first with destroyers before they attempt to take in the much bigger aircraft carriers in. Now, as for the Iranians, they seem to be particularly well kitted for this war. Back then, during the tanker wars 1980 to 1988, all they had to fight the Americans with were those old school limpet mines that were inherited from the Shah's days. But this time around, they have an array of weapons. They have fast attack boats. They have all sorts of torpedoes and small submarines. They have anti-ship ballistic missiles. They have the old limpet mines, and they have the new generation acoustic, all sorts of generations and technology when it comes to mines. And they definitely have the huge ballistic missiles, the one they've been, fighting with for for weeks now. So essentially, that is the fixture. Let us see what to expect in this war. Thank you very much.